Back in Washington, federal employees who work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility positions are now on paid leave. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez explains this sweeping move by President Trump.
From the government agencies that oversee air travel to public health to criminal justice, the debate over diversity is exploding throughout the country. Making good on a campaign promise, President Trump is slashing all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across the federal government.
We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based.
The president signing an executive order his first day back in the White House.
This is a big deal, merit. Our country is going to be based on merit again. Can you believe it?
And overnight, this new government memo saying DEI policies result in shameful discrimination and directing federal agencies to place all DEI employees on paid leave by this evening. After the murder of George Floyd and the social justice movement it sparked in 2020, DEI programs flourished across private companies and the federal government.
The values of diversity, equity, and inclusion are the core strength of America.
But since then, conservative activists have railed against the programs. And after Trump's re-election, major companies like Walmart, McDonald's, and Meta, Facebook's parent company, have scrapped their DEI programs.
It's one thing to say we want to be kind of like welcoming and make a good environment for everyone. And I think it's another to basically say that masculinity is bad.
One of the president's executive orders directs the attorney general to submit recommendations for enforcing federal civil rights laws to encourage the private sector to end DEI. Another revokes an executive order signed by President Lyndon Johnson in 1965 that the Trump administration says mandated affirmative action. The Congressional Black Caucus calling Trump's changes an attempt to take our country backward.
Diversity, equity, inclusion programs is really teaching us how to all work together in a positive way for a common goal.
Former Facebook employee Bari Williams helped create one of the company's canceled diversity initiatives.
People think that equates to lowering the bar. It isn't lowering the bar, it's casting a wider net.
Diversity organizations and civil rights leaders gathered yesterday in response to these new orders, holding a roundtable event at the National Press Club, highlighting what they call the dangerous rollback of hard-fought civil rights gains. Joining us now, the president and CEO of the National Urban League, Marc Morial. He led and moderated yesterday's event. So what was the response to the rollback, and what's the plan moving forward?
Good morning. The response to the rollback is that the leaders there are unified in saying we will resist and we will pay any price, bear any burden, support any friend, or oppose any foe to ensure that equal opportunity continues to be the value proposition and the law of the land. This is an attack on the last 70 years. This is an attack on a majority of Americans who want to be included in the economic mainstream. Make no mistake about it. There's also an element, as somebody asked me yesterday, of political retribution and payback to those communities that may not have been supporters of the current administration and the new president. So we will resist. What's on the table? How to leverage our consumer power. $5 trillion plus from all of the communities represented yesterday. How to think about litigation. There's already been a number of lawsuits that have been filed on the theory that the president cannot, by executive action, wipe out the Civil Rights Act of 1964, wipe out court decisions that have interpreted that act, and wipe out the commitment that this nation has had to equal opportunity. So we want those who've aligned with us in Congress to certainly understand that. We want those in the business community to understand the consumer power and the incredible potential of all of the communities that simply want to be included in the mainstream of America. And let me address this mythology about merit. What DE&I says is give everyone with merit a chance. And I'll say this, Mika, 81% of Americans support what I'm talking about. That's a Harris poll from last year. So this is really a majoritarian move to protect equal opportunity. You could call it DE&I, you could call it inclusion. It is not about discrimination. It's about the eradication of historic discrimination.
Mark, there is so much evidence now and data suggesting that more diverse leadership teams produce better results. We know that, right? I know that because I do a lot of work on women in leadership. You know that from your perspective as well. Are you dismayed when you see how quickly American corporations, those major corporations, McDonald's, Walmart, Meta, of course, are following Donald Trump's lead? And what will it mean for the U.S. economy if they do so?
Well, I'm dismayed, I'm disappointed, and I've expressed that to a number of executives. But I also want to lift up the large number of executives who've also shared with me that they remain committed. They will not be intimidated. Now, they're not in the headlines. Many of them don't. But let me encourage you to take a look at what Jamie Dimon said at Davos. He said, we're going to continue to reach out to Black, Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQ communities because it's good for my business.
It's a bottom line issue.
And it's a bottom line issue. And the size and the growth and the consumer power of many of these communities is what I would encourage American business to think about.
Mayor Morial, there was a sense that from the election that DEI issues hurt Democrats, that there's a sense that at least a narrative that this was that this is an issue for voters. I know Congressman Richie Torres was on this show recently and said, you know, nobody talks to him, comes up and says, I'm really worried about DEI issues. Like, how do you beat back the sense that that celebrating diversity, casting a wide net, as the programs are rightfully described, is some sort of detriment to Democrats?
Hurts the Democrats with who? Hurts the Democrats with who? The issue is to not get caught in the nomenclature of DE&I, but to talk about American values. And Democrats need to do a better job talking about inclusion, equal opportunity as an American value. From the founding of this country, the concept of e pluribus unum, equal justice under the law, emblazoned on the Supreme Court. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 opening the doors to women and other people of color to be included in the economic mainstream. You got to get your messaging straight and not get caught in nomenclature. Republicans have been good in attacking terminology. Democrats need to get their act together when it comes to advancing values and having people understand what these values really, really mean. I had an opportunity to go to some of the very best schools in America, the Ivy League, Georgetown University Law Center, because those schools did recruit me, and historically they had not recruited me. Did I have merit? I was a great student and got out of those schools with good marks and have had a great and successful career. I'm an example, and there are many who, because, quote unquote, equal opportunity, open doors, got a chance to achieve. That's what we're talking about. Give everyone with merit. And business leaders, Democrats, and I would hope that Republicans would return to where they were under George W. Bush, with the great Everett Dirksen, if you will, working with President Johnson to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This idea that civil rights is a partisan and a political issue is offensive. It's inconsistent with history. And we got to turn the page on that, because all of these communities hold the economic future of America. And the sooner we recognize that that's what the evidence shows, the better off we're going to be as a nation. So I just want everyone to know we're going to passionately resist, because we must, and we're going to try to convince the American people. Here's what I'd say to you about, quote unquote, losing the election. 81% of people in the Harris poll say they support the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion when you talk about it as ensuring that government and the private sector look like America. That's what we need to be talking about.
President and CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morial, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And